Welcome to This Week Health Events, where we amplify great thinking with interviews from the floor. And the floor just happens to be our home offices, but we're going to keep doing the shows. Special thanks to our channel sponsors, Starbridge Advisors, HealthErics, Galen Healthcare, VMware, and ProTalent Advisors for choosing to invest in our show. My name is Bill Russell, Healthcare CIO coach and creator of This Week in Health IT, set of podcast videos and collaboration events dedicated to developing the next generation of health leaders. You know, one of the things I really miss about the show, as I've said before, is doing that booth walk where I come across solutions that I was not familiar with or I just wasn't introduced to before. And I'm always looking for ones that are backstopped by respectable health systems that are using the solution. And, you know, as I said before, these booth walk interviews that I'm doing are really off the cuff. So I'm just exploring solutions just like I'm walking the floor. And so today I'm excited to be joined by Matthew. Matthew, how do you say your last name? Michela?
Yeah, Michela. Perfect. Thanks, Bill.
Perfect. Life Image CEO and Geisinger Senior Director, Kim Chaundry from Danville, Pennsylvania. Kim, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to, just so you know how this works, when you're talking, this is a Zoom video conference. When you're talking, you'll be the one on the screen. When you're not talking, it'll be whoever is talking is going to be on the screen. So you can do whatever you want when you're not talking. No one's going to be able to see you. It's just a little housekeeping we probably should have done before we got on the show. So here's how we're going to do this. This is literally a booth visit. I'm going to give you open-ended question to really start, and then we'll go from there. I'm a, recovering CIO, as I say, 16 hospital system. I'm coming up to your booth. Matthew, I'm going to start with you. Give us an idea of what I would have seen if I had come to your booth at the show.
So if you had shown up at HIMSS with our booth, you would have seen an absolutely fabulous little 2-story booth for our first ever second story, and a whole series of things around interoperability, about data access and the breadth of our network and the partnerships that we have in place, and then a showcase, right, of a specific solution that we're very excited about that we've put together in conjunction with Geisinger and with Orion and PA in Pennsylvania. For Life Image itself, Bill, I think what I would have explained to you and you would have seen is that, we're a mature healthcare IT company that's focused on interoperability. And the way that we would discuss it, right, with the technical jargon is we're an enterprise-wide evidence-based network that connects thousands of hospitals and facilities, about 10,000 in the US, another 60,000 internationally, that then accesses medical information of a wide variety of types. Imaging is our core kind of default use case because accessing medical imaging is incredibly complicated and hard, and because it's so hard, has predominantly been left out of most of the large-scale standardization initiatives in order to kind of make access to data. And that's really been our core expertise in data. But we actually access, govern medical information of any categories, and probably about 30% of the data that flows across our broad network, which touches about 12 to 15 million patients a month of medical information. And that's between facilities, not inside the facility itself, although we do help support and manage that for thousands of use cases, right? Whether it's a patient who needs information sent to a trauma 1 or a level 1 trauma center for stroke, or whether it's a cancer patient going to a specialist that wants 5 years of medical history, et cetera, et cetera. We have the plumbing, right, that connects hundreds and hundreds of different healthcare IT companies together so that medical information can move, so that doctors can treat patients and make diagnoses and do treatment plans. Companies can develop drugs, medical device companies can get approval from the FDA and devices. Companies that are involved in payment or policies and need medical information to determine medical necessity do that. So we sit as this network, very large network in place. That's kind of who we are, before we talk a little bit about kind of our new innovations with Geisinger.
Wow. So I end up with a lot of questions as a result of that. So I hear, repository for research. I hear almost an HIE of sorts. I hear a network for evidence sharing. I almost heard the ability to move records from one health system to another in the case of care management and continuum of care. Am I hearing all those things in this solution, or am I overreaching with what I've heard?
You're hearing all of those things, right? So, we were originally born as a company to solve the problem of moving a medical image 150 feet across Tremont Street in Boston, Massachusetts, between two departments at Mass General, where their standard workflow was 6 days to get the image literally across the street. So a patient couldn't have a follow-up appointment for cancer treatment for a week because the image wasn't there. So we solved that problem. And because of that, we started in imaging and then created solutions to all of these non-interoperable environments and systems in imaging, and then grew to this really broad network of, today we sit in 19 of the top 20 institutions in the country, and we've got about 90% market presence in all academic medical centers and tertiary care facilities. And we expanded beyond the imaging use cases into other data types because we invest in interoperability and public standards. No proprietary anything in our platform. We don't do proprietary codes. We don't do proprietary standards. We want everything to be accessible, and that's our value and has been for a decade or more. And so as a corporate value. And so once you think about, right, the plumbing, right, the network being agnostic to data type, then there's no reason not to provision it to all these other non-interoperable entities. So in Pennsylvania with Geisinger and KeyHIE and Orion, right, we have a solution, which we'll talk about, that helps image enable that HIE, that regional HIE, that then provisions for roughly 6 million patients in that geography and 350 institutions the ability to access imaging in conjunction to the other information in the HIE using really new smart and fire technology. Whereas in other cases, we're enabling three of the largest telehealth companies in the country to access medical information on a patient. So when they get on the phone with you, they have access to information so they can treat you. Now, probably not for a sore throat, right? But for patients that need lots of imaging, so yes, we play in all those kind of areas because, I guess the non-technical corollary, if we weren't in healthcare, if we were a telecom company, as an example, our competitors would be Verizon, right? Where they're going to connect into any device you have, whether it's an iPad or it's an Android or it's a television or it's a router. They don't care what the device is. Their job is just to get data in and out of it. I'm connecting into healthcare data silos. I don't care what that device is, whether it's a monitor or it's a database or it's a cloud or it's a device or it's a camera in dermatology, and then get that wherever it needs to be without screwing it up, without screwing up the diagnostic quality. And once you do that, then you can solve lots of other kind of use cases for folks. And, and we grew up in the world of actual care delivery. So most of our activity is directly affecting patients immediately, but we support a lot of research. All these AI companies in imaging that are building algorithms need data, right, to test their models, and we can help them do that, in secure and, confidential ways. And so those are the kinds of things that we do. And I'm sorry, thanks, Bill, for letting me go on so long.
Oh, no, absolutely. So that's where we're gonna go to that solution, because this is what I generally would do is, go to something that I can really get my arms around and then go from there. It sounds like, yes, you are the network behind it. You are the Verizon of connecting up all these different things. But let's talk about imaging. I think, people don't recognize that, generally speaking, in the HIE, you don't have the imaging data necessarily there. They think it's in the EHR, but a lot of the imaging data resides outside the EHR and it's just referenced from the EHR. And the same thing's true within the HIE. So you guys really fill that gap. Again, am I hearing this right? You're filling that gap of within Pennsylvania, within that region that Geisinger is playing in. You not only you will come alongside that HIE and provide access to the images that are available across that network.
That's right. So EHRs generally can't handle imaging. They never have. I'm not being negative. It's just hard. And so if you are working in an Epic EHR or you're working in a Cerner EHR and you have imaging that's available and you can click through and see it, other than 1 or 2 hospitals in the country, that's us. So we're the intel behind, so to speak, and we're facilitating that connectivity to access that imaging out of PACS and then sharing that between institutions, providers, individuals, patients, et cetera, in that regard, right? And so for HIEs, and this one in particular for KeyHIE, was one of the largest, in the country. They've already established, right, this network of 350 roughly hospitals in Pennsylvania, and Geisinger has led that effort for a long time to get them connected. But since imaging's so hard, it's not a part of it. So if you want to receive in your hospital one and you want to get your medical information on a patient that's showing up in your emergency room from hospital two, you can go to the HIE and you can collect some information, but it's going to be fairly rudimentary information that you can extract from the EHR. And then you're going to come to somebody like LifeImage and say, now I have a whole different technology platform. Please go get that for me from the other institution. It might not be in the same time. There might be a delay. Maybe it's an institution that's not on our network and that requires an extra consent. There's all these logistical things. So what we've done here in Pennsylvania is we've said, no, let's unify all this. Let's make it simpler, right, for the providers and then this whole community to have the data integrated, not just, hey, a CT exam existed, but here's the actual exam and here's the radiology report associated with it, so you know what the diagnosis and the treatment was, or at least should be, so you can actually have true history. And so it's very unique. This doesn't exist. It's never been done anywhere in America before, anywhere in the world before. We used Smart on Fire to do it so that it's completely standards-based and really fast and can be used in other kind of settings and infrastructures. But it really was, quite honestly, started from the place of Geisinger really saying, we have to solve this problem, and not just for us, because Geisinger's been a longstanding customer of LifeImage and we helped them with that. But how do we solve it for this really broad network on a big community population basis to effectively, drive cost and quality and care, right? And so it needed somebody with the market presence and leadership and the true commitment to, frankly, technology innovation, like somebody like Geisinger, to say, how do we make these parties work together to make this work?
So Kim, talk to us about the KeyHIE and the work that Geisinger did to really put that in place and the value that brings to the community. And then we'll go into the imaging a little bit.
Sure. So Geisinger had taken a stance all the way back in 2005 that they really wanted to make sure wherever our patients were going in the community, that they would have an opportunity to get access to their data or know where they are in the community. We live in a rural area, so hospitals are probably every other town or maybe 5 other towns over. So we really wanted to make sure we had an opportunity to take care of our customers or our patients in our communities and in our surrounding communities. Like Matt had mentioned, we've grown very large. We're servicing about 6.8 million patients in 56 counties in Pennsylvania, and we're also now in New Jersey, servicing about 7 counties in New Jersey. We found pretty quickly that as we grew, expectations grew. We needed to get quicker, faster, more information, to automate the processes to be more reactive to be proactive instead of reactive. So we're pushing a lot of clinical data directly to the providers so that they don't even have to go looking for it. And our opportunity here with LifeImage and Orion it's a game changer. Just think about it. You as a patient are seen at a local facility and you have a CAT scan done and it's a trauma, and now you've got to be sent to a tertiary care center. Now you're going there and your images are there before you even get there. You don't have to radiate the patient again. The patient experience is a lot smoother transitions of care, and it's a savings. We're all trying very hard to reduce costs in healthcare, and this is definitely a game changer for us, and it's a great opportunity, and the physicians love it. And we made sure when we were working with LifeImage and Orion that we kept it easy for them. So we really worked a lot on the use and the usability of the system.
So are you talking about, with KeyHIE, are you talking about all Geisinger locations? Or are you talking about them actually going from maybe a Geisinger location to somebody that's in your clinically integrated network, but not necessarily in your EHR platform?
That's correct.
Wow.
That's correct.
Because, for those who are sitting there going, oh, this is easy. It's not that easy. we had, radiology and cardiology imaging across our 16 hospitals where I was. We had, I think, when we started, we had 6 radiology imaging systems with their different repositories. And we literally had doctors going from one hospital to another and not able to get their images, which was problematic. But my most recent story is my father-in-law, 87-year-old father-in-law, goes to one hospital with flu and pneumonia, and essentially he gets a chest X-ray, and they do all that. He goes to the next hospital, and they're like, it'll be too long for us to wait till we get that image, so we're just going to do the imaging again. And that's the kind of stuff that this solution really takes care of or addresses, not from a customer experience standpoint, from a cost standpoint, but also from a speed of care standpoint, from where you sit. And that's how you guys designed it, I assume.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's, we hear a lot of success stories. We had a patient that had to be sent down to CHOP, so knowing that, it was a kid, probably worried, parents really worried. We actually sent all of their images over to them before the patient even arrived from the helicopter. And it just allowed the physician receiving the patient to get a better understanding. It allowed the parents to relax and know that the transitions of care are happening and that they're going to be informed and know exactly what transpired at this hospital.
So indulge me here. So Geisinger is on, you guys are on Epic or Cerner?
We're on Epic.
You're on Epic, but CHOP is on, what is CHOP on?
They're on Epic as well. But so the Care Everywhere, Care Elsewhere in Epic can read the radiology report, but not really access to the image itself. So through LifeImage, we were able to make sure that the providers from CHOP was actually looking at quality images, DICOM viewers, to be able to actually interpret from reading the report as well as seeing the image themselves.
Yeah, and that's a huge gap, and that's fantastic. So Care Everywhere, they're going to get the medical record from one location to the other, although I just did a whole show on where that does and does not work.
Right.
But still, they're going to be missing the images. And so you're sending across those high-res images to CHOP before the patient actually gets there.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's a fantastic solution. So,
and again, Bill, it doesn't matter whether they're on Epic or they're on Cerner or they're on Meditech. I mean, it doesn't matter, right? And it doesn't matter whether the image was taken using a GE scanner or a Siemens scanner. I mean, none of that matters, right? We've got to figure out how that works, irrespective of version, software version, modeling, workflow, right?
Yeah, so you're an agnostic repository. Are you a repository? Are you actually pulling the images in to then host them?
We're pulling the images in. I mean, as a part of our, business practice, right? You think about it this way, right? If we're helping hospitals exchange medical information on, we'll say, roughly 12 million patients every single month, and sometimes that might be, a single CT, or it might be a drug list, but it also could be 5 years of patient history with 27 exams and all their associated data. We're not going to store that, right? The cost of that is crazy to redundantly store it when it already exists inside the institution. So we just need to know where it is. We'd be able to federate it, understand it, index it, reconcile patients so we know who they are as best as they can. And then either, depending on your use case, provide visualization into it without moving it, or actually move it. And then institutions have their own internal policies on, well, do I want to ingest it? Do I only want to ingest 3 slices of a 1,200 slice exam? What do I want to do with my own internal, practices, which are different from institution to institution. So we have to make sure they can do all of those, gyrations with the data.
Wow. So does the new ONC proposed rule change how you're going to approach this or think about this?
So, from LifeImage's perspective, right, we've been working with ONC for the better part of a year and a half, and we've provided a lot of guidance. I work with Sequoia, I work with, the Commonwealth, group. We're obviously try to be standards, in space and everything we can, and interoperability is, what we drive at. So there's very little in the report and the standards that we didn't know was coming because we've been pretty actively involved. And they included imaging, which was a big, big step for them, right, to do that. And in the first generation, it'll be the imaging narrative in the report, right, which is technically easier. But from our point of view, we've already built all of this technology. There's literally nothing that LifeImage needs to do to help our customers be completely compliant with all of these standards. Now, again, every customer is different, right? So in some customers, they'll say, yep, you're digitally connected into our pathology archives, and then we can include it in a data set. Others say, no, I have an entirely different vendor that I work with for that data slice. So every institution is going to be different, but for LifeImage, we've already built all of this, and today we're already provisioning data of every dimension that's included in the standards to consumers in some of our patient portals and the information that they're requesting. So we don't have a technology build, but we do have an implementation build with our customers and with providers who may have 17 different vendors they have to rationalize now, or may not have the internal ability to do an HL7 connection because they never built the staff. So there's a lot of work on the provider side that has to be done depending on their site. But on our side, it's literally just integration and connectivity. And we're very thrilled, right, that the rules are in place because we think ultimately that's the only way we're going to really improve cost and quality in a dramatic way is to make data more accessible to everybody, including patients. That's
So give me an idea, so as This Week in Health IT, I would naturally ask, from the point of contracting till the point I get something implemented. Let's assume we want to start in Southern California, we want to start sharing images across the clinically integrated network, which represents a lot of different EHRs. What does an implementation look like?
So the way I think, Bill, I'd answer that, right, is if you think about the O&C rules, right, they're patient-centric or somebody representing the patient. So you've got to have the technical ability to find and acquire this, a minimum required data set within an institution, kind of as a one transaction, right? It's not necessarily population-based, although if you solve it technically, you can solve it on a population base. So in that regard, we're assuming that a request comes through just as it does in our existing infrastructure. It just happens to come from a patient or somebody representing them. That workflow already exists. That comes through as a digital request into a medical record office that's using integration we've already built with them that's either inside their UI or inside our UI that says, here's who the patient is, these are demographics, this is how it works, push these buttons, query retrieve out of your archives, combine it all together and send it off to the patient. And that can be highly automated, or you can put manual checks along the way. In most of our customers, right, our use case is basic, it starts with imaging, so it's all kinds of imaging. With others, right, it's a much more comprehensive approach where they say, okay, go into our, connect it to our EHR so that you can extract it out of, and the records and the paper records, or go into Quest and pull, our lab data, et cetera. So every customer has their own set of vendors. Some we do all of it, some we only do the imaging part. But to your question of integration, if it's an existing customer set up, then it works today. The new rules don't put nothing new on it, right? That request can be fulfilled. It's more training the folks inside the hospital to respond to the request when it comes than it is a technical integration. If it's a customer that would like to use us as LifeImage, right, to collect the rest of that information, then depending upon how many data stores they have, we may have additional integration that occurs. Sometimes that integration can take us, frankly, 3 hours. Sometimes that integration can take us 8 weeks because it's never our work cycle time. It's always what a provider has available, right? If they can't get to you because they're really busy and talk to you for 5 weeks or schedule a meeting for 6 weeks, you can't do much, right? So the busy nature of the hospital setting creates cycle time, but the actual technical work, this is all mature technology on our part.
Yep.
And
the listeners of this are going to understand. I mean, in some health systems, a contract takes 4 weeks. In some health systems, it takes 3 months.
Right. Right. Yeah. But we're setting up hospitals as simple connection points with simple workflow we're literally able to do that in an hour. And we're, just last year, we brought 400 hospitals internationally onto our network. And that average implementation time was less than a day for each one. Now, that's once we get started,
Yep.
right? It took a little while sometimes to figure out which port to connect to, because the people doing the contracting was different from their technical people, or there's small outside facilities who have outsourced IT. But once you get the right 7 questions answered, it happens right away.
Yep, absolutely. Last question, because I appreciate you guys sticking around for a little extra time, but the real world evidence, is that playing a role right now in the virus that's going around the world? Are you a conduit for sharing of evidence, or am I reading too much into that?
So on our part, the answer is no today. Having said that, we've just been, frankly, pretty overwhelmed in the last month or so with existing customers or with folks that haven't managed to get their arms around digital image transfer yet, of folks that are saying, hey, we recognize this is coming, and we know we're going to have to transfer chest CTs.
Yeah.
And how do we do it? So we've got a lot of new inquiries, really from folks that aren't quite as experienced in the field, because they just haven't done it. They've been very comfortable producing CDs and shipping them around, and now they're starting to recognize, that's not going to work, right? This could really be much more serious. So we're getting a lot of that kind of demand and market education here, but in the international locations where we're sending and receiving from, our model principally, historically, has been designed for care that works between the US and not internationally. So while we've got hundreds of hospitals in Italy, as an example, those are hospitals that send patients to the US or transfer care or get a radiology overread from here, but the patients are being treated there. So that doesn't require us to be actively involved in that. I think, unfortunately, as the next few months progress and it moves here, we really have to help solve these problems.
Yeah. Well, hey, I appreciate you going through this booth visit with me. This is what it feels like. You sort of walk up and you're like, okay, these are the key talking points. So now I understand where you guys fit. I mean, first of all, you're the plumbing around a lot of different things. So if I had some creative ideas, you're probably one of the companies I could sit down with. But just generally talking about the Geisinger solution, there is an opportunity to transfer those images as a part of the entire medical record. So as we look at building out the longitudinal patient record for our community in order to improve care, this is one of the solutions that we should be looking at. So that's what I'm hearing.
Well, Bill, one more thing, if you don't mind, if you got an extra 3 minutes, right? Because one of the other things we're doing with Geisinger that's really innovative, right, is we've launched in the fourth quarter last year, a life image application, which we call our Mammosphere, right? And think of Mammosphere, right? It's it's a patient portal. I hate to use that word. It's got a UI. It's very friendly for a patient point of view. It sits plugged into Life Image on our enterprise network and allows a patient individually to make requests for their data anywhere in the network where it exists, so that they get to control and they get to own it, right? So what the ONC is eventually trying to build to, we've been building that on our kind of platform here, and it's focused on women who are concerned about their breast health, and the use case is getting mammographies and making sure your priors are available, even if you might be getting them at Geisinger, but you just moved from San Francisco, right? How do I make sure they're there? Because without priors available for mammograms, and we know across our data of millions of data points every month, about 25% of all patients that go for mammograms, their annual screening, don't have priors, right? Even though really good academic centers will argue with you that they were way better than a 25% average, but it's about 20 to 25% wherever you go. And again, that's because we got a mobile population and imaging centers move and people go different places for cost. But if you don't have a prior mammogram, what we know from the clinical studies we've done is that you're coming back for further diagnostic testing, and maybe that's a mammogram, but it certainly could be an MRI. And there's actually a significant amount of population with dense breasts that work their way all the way through a process to surgical biopsy. And what we know is that all of that additional diagnostic testing all the way up through biopsy, about 2/3 of that is a false positive. Completely wasted patient experience, completely wasted cost, increased risk, increased radiation for a really vulnerable population that we don't want to have more radiation. But it's because when that initial read is done, which sometimes is done in 6 hours now, if they don't have that prior, then very few radiologists are going to make an unambiguous call on this, unless it's super really clear or super really bad. It's, I don't know, come back. And so in order to try to close that 25% missing prior mammosphere or mammography gap and get it to 0, right? It's putting the ability in the patient's hands to collect their records prior and over the course of their life, wherever they go. So with a push of a button, they can digitally collect it. With a push of a button, they could send it to Geisinger here, so that by the time they show up for treatment, all that data is available. And so,
so let's drill into that real quick. So the push of the button, is that happening within my chart? So I'm logged into Geisinger's my chart, I'm hitting request, it's pulling that information in and moving it over, or is that happening in its own app and its own interface?
It's happening in its own app and its own interface. Now it ties into my chart and can extract data out of my chart, right? Depending on the institution. But the idea here is to make sure that the patient has an agnostic account. So whether they move from Epic to Cerner, they move from geography, they move from system to system, they're not tied into one specific, infrastructure account. It's theirs. And they can add to it, right, as much as they want, right? They can upload their own pictures, their own files, right? Their own.
Right. Are you trying to be a health vault with this kind of solution?
So in essence, right, conceptually, that's what it is, but it's focused particularly on specific clinical conditions and use cases, right, that have a high need for engagement and a high need to make sure that they've got their data digitized to move in lots of different places. And so Geisinger has gone live with that in the 4th quarter. We have several other academic medical centers that have also been innovative to pilot this. And it's really, think of it as from a point of view of a provider, right? It solves all my workflow, or a lot of my workflow problems by making sure patients are here. But it's also something I can give to my patients to show them that I actually care about them.
Yep. No, I absolutely get that. Do you white box it, or do you allow the health system to brand on top of it?
Yep. Health system can brand on top of it. Exactly. Right. And so we're running a large scale clinical trial on this, a nationwide trial that's been gearing up in the course of the year. In the provider setting, right, Geisinger really stepped forward, again, under this same umbrella of innovation with the KeyHIE to say, how are we going to make sure that medical information is accessible in all of these different use cases? This was one that said, all right, let's focus on women's breast health with this, brand new innovative kind of application, and let's see what kind of engagement we get from patients out of it and what kind of use for it.
Yeah, makes sense. Matt, Kim, thank you very much for taking the time to come on the show. I really appreciate it. And, this really is the part I miss. I was not familiar with this solution, and I think there's a lot of value for health systems that are poking around in this space to try to figure out how to do things. This is definitely one of those booths that, and gosh, now you have a 2-story booth that you're going to be taking. hopefully you'll get to use that at some point. That'll be pretty exciting.
Exactly. So we can overlook, right, all the folks on the floor that we want to be more interoperable and chastise them when they're not.
Yeah, I understand that. All right, let me close out the show, then come back to the two of you. So, don't forget to check back multiple times this week. We're going to be dropping more shows from the virtual HIMSS show, I guess you'll call it. We have a couple more interviews to do. This show is a production of This Week in Health IT. For more great content, check out the website, thisweekhealth.com, or the YouTube channel. Thanks for listening. That's all for now.